Hello, Andrew. I'm not hearing you.
Where are you?
I am in Salt Lake City. This
Okay.
is a client of mine.
Okay. What do they manufacture?
They make archery bows, so for Olympics and target bows. I think we locked up for a second.
Can't hear very well. Hoyt Archery.
Yeah, Hoyt
Okay.
Archery. They started like in 1932, I believe.
Okay. And still going, thanks to your coaching.
Well, yeah, maybe a little bit.
Okay. So what sort of things do they export or not?
Oh yeah. Hoyt's yes, global.
Okay. Right.
I mean, so
I'm not in the archery world.
Yeah, so like in the
very much about
Olympics,
Yeah.
I would say more than half of the archers in the Olympics, regardless of which country, use Hoyt bows.
Okay. All right. Great. So
And then
they're like the gold standard.
yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay, good for them.
Yeah, and so then they also make the recurve. I'll show you. You're probably more familiar with this style. So this is what you would see more in the Eastern cultures.
Right.
And so they've done more innovation. So Earl Hoyt, who started the company, they own most of the patents and some of the newest technology from the 40s up through last year.
Cool.
Yeah, so it's all manufactured here in the U.S.
Okay, I'm just gonna Hoyt France. I'll see if they have a Hoyt France shop. Hoyt France. Ooh, crossbows.
Yeah, so there's but Hoyt doesn't make those. Hoyt doesn't do any crossbows. So probably what you're seeing is probably an archery club or an archery dealer, and because they don't have Hoyt stores, all right? They sell directly to distributors and or an individual shop owner.
Okay. It's 1,400 euros, which is about $1,400. So
yeah. Good morning, David.
Morning, gentlemen.
hello. Okay.
Who's okay? Me?
Yeah, you.
Not really.
Oh shit! What's going on? What's going on, Dave?
You hear my voice is different?
Sorry?
You hear that my voice is different?
Yeah.
My voice is different because my cancer has become active.
Oh,
boy. I'm starting cancer treatment. Next month I start my cancer treatment.
Oh, Dave.
So it's I've lost 42 pounds, 22 kilos, all due to my cancer. So the good news is as soon as I started, the doctor said it'll come back. So my cancer is called CLL. It's a blood-borne cancer. So as the doctor said to me, of all the cancers I have, this is probably the best. He said, unfortunately, the downside is right now we can't cure it. The upside is it doesn't kill you. As long as we catch it early enough. So it's fascinating what they do. They took blood for a DNA test, but it wasn't my DNA test. It was a DNA of the cancer to figure out what is the best treatment.
Interesting.
And so now there's three of the leading oncologists probably in the world. They're like the top 10 oncologists in the world. They're at Princess Margaret Hospital. They're in Sunnybrook. They're debating on two different approaches. One approach is a pill that I take the rest of my life. which a friend of mine is on. And then another one is a chemotherapy and other treatment, which will last around 3 to 6 months. And then it'll arrest the growth, put it back in a resting state. And then I have to continue to be monitored every 3 months. And if it comes back, do it again. So I have to debate whether I want to go on a daily regimen of a pill every 3 months. Now, the cost of the pill is not cheap. It's $13,000 a month, which I can't afford. Luckily, AstraZeneca pays for most of it, and the government of Canada pays the rest. So I'm lucky that I'm here, but you can't get it at a drugstore. So if you don't, if they mail it to you. So if you don't get it on time, you're screwed. And that happened to my friend in Kansas City. When he moved from Chicago to Kansas City, they didn't do the timing of the pill delivery right. So yeah, he had to go to a hospital and get one.
So it's not free. You don't have a sort of free national health service in
no. The way it works is that the drug company and the Leukemia Society combine to cover it. Whatever's not covered is covered by by our provincial health care.
Okay.
So it doesn't cost me anything. If I was in the States, it might be another story. But the drug company, the insurance companies do not cover this because it's still considered experimental.
That really,
welcome to the United States of America. But I'm lucky I'm here, it's covered.
Yeah, well, that's why I feel, optimistic for you, David, because
I'm totally optimistic, but I have to explain why my voice has changed.
Yeah.
I did a podcast the other day, and then I heard the podcast, and it didn't even sound like me. It's
well, I know your voice quite well, David. It doesn't. I mean, there is a change, but it's not a big change.
No, it used to be a lot bigger.
No, David, we still know it's David.
Yeah. No, it used to be a lot bigger. Believe me. Last week, before I went on these pills, it was like an out-of-body experience. It was just really weird.
Okay.
Yeah, go to my LinkedIn page. I have the post up there for the podcast. You'll hear my voice is very different.
Okay.
How was the talk, Dave?
Oh, it was really good. I did 2 of them, one in England, one in the Philippines, both on culture. One was about the issue of return to work and maintaining one's culture and sustaining it. And the other one was, what are the characteristics of the culture, and that a change in strategy is not a change in culture. So I had 2 of them. They both went well. I mean, wind me up on that topic, I'll go forever. They were supposed to be 30 minutes. They both wound up being 40.
Yeah.
I have to learn how to shut up.
HR Insights series.
I get you when you get it.
What? You got it?
This is I'm on your profile now. HR Insights, the podcast series, why company values matter. That's very good. Corporate culture in a hybrid world. Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
I love that. I love everything you do, David.
Oh, you're so sweet. Well, I wish my clients did lately. Yeah. So, yeah, but that's where it's at. So I have not told anybody yet. So you guys are the first to hear.
Okay.
So.
It sucks.
Yeah,
sorry, David. You have a leukemia diagnosis?
Yeah, CLL.
What kind of leukemia is that? What kind of leukemia is that?
It's leukemia, but it's carried through the blood system. It's
But
not,
is it one of the
it's
bad, is it one of the nasty
No.
ones or one of the ones you can live with?
one you can live with as long as it's treated early.
Yeah, I have a friend with that. It's
And
very traumatic, but you can live with it. You can live with it if it's treated early. And you're a strong guy. You will argue it out of your body.
Yeah, my problem is they put me on prednisone to try to get my voice back. And prednisone, I don't know if everybody's been on it, it was like an out-of-body speed experience. Before I started taking my ADHD pills, I now realize how the rest of the world saw me. That was scary. That was real scary.
I'll be curious to see how your thoughts and how your blogs change, like to what level of openness and new ideas are generated.
Well, I did write one that I'm not going to publish because I wrote one about diversity and inclusion. And I show that diversity and inclusion has been on CEOs and CHROs priority list for 20 plus years. So obviously they failed because nothing's changed. It's gotten worse.
Yeah, for real.
And then I shared a story of my father from World War II and a story of how Hallmark cards dealt with it, and said all the courses in the world, all the training in the world is a bunch of crap. I said it nicely.
Yeah.
The only way to get people to move off of where they are is they have to have a visceral emotional experience. And the only way it happened at Hallmark is Mr. Hall, who's third generation, got up in tears in front of his small groups of 20, 30 people at a time, and he had 6,000 employees. It took him a whole year. Wow. He and one of their most senior Black person, who was only a supervisor, because you didn't get promoted beyond that if you were at Hall, if you were Black, sat there, and the two of them together repeated this emotional experience every day, 2-3 times a day. Wow. And people were totally taken back, because if he could admit that his families were schmucks, and that he made a mistake and he's going to correct it, then I got to admit it. And in a focus group I was doing, I heard the story about it. And the guy was telling me it was the Black person of color who was with him. And the guy next to him, who obviously was his friend, because I saw when they came in together, they were joking, they had coffee, everything else. This guy next to him started to get really emotional. And the person of color put his arm around them. And the white guy said that the reason I'm getting emotional is because as a result of this intervention, so to speak, I realized I was a real asshole towards him. But I never realized it because I never saw it from anybody else's experience. And nobody ever told me it was wrong. So I believe that's the only way. My father in World War II was almost killed twice by his own people, because in Yank magazine, he wrote a letter saying he's sick and tired of the American soldiers who miss their mommies and want, scotch or whiskey. They don't realize what they're fighting for. And so in a letter back to the Yank magazine, somebody wrote, "So Irv, what are you fighting for?" So he wrote back, I am fighting to make sure the world is safe from fascism, and that when this war is over, we'll end Jim Crow laws. And after that, there were 2 incidents where they tried to kill him.
Wow.
And he was lucky. One of the guys had second thoughts. He was in charge of the dock movements of ships and goods in Basra in the port. And they try, those big hooks that they use on cranes. Somebody tried to throw it at him, and somebody said, "Duck." He ducked just in time. Another time, which is really fun. Another time comes in, he was in the mess hall. Now, my father, being the person he was, never wore his insignia, his stripes as an officer, because he believed everybody's equal and all this other crap. And so in the mess hall, some kid from Kentucky comes up to him and starts saying anti-Semitic remarks. My father takes his glasses off, hands them to his friend, and says, "Hold these." My father decides, wipe the floor with this kid, Because this kid didn't know that my father left home when he was 16, lived on the streets in Newark, and was not, you might say, somebody you don't want to rumble with, especially a redhead at 6'2". And so, who has a lot of anger issues, had a lot of anger issues. So as he's finishing up, one of the captains come in, looks at my father and says to this private that he's going to press charges against him because he hit an officer. Because you're supposed to know if it's an officer, even if they're not wearing the stripes.
Interesting.
And my father looked at the captain and said, no, I think he learned his lesson.
Well, street justice.
Yeah, he did learn his lesson, supposedly. So that's what I'm saying. It's got to be visceral, and all these training courses, which and matter of fact, in the organization, I'm probably going to offend a lot of my colleagues and friends, because all this stuff on diversity and inclusion is a waste of time, because it doesn't change anybody's emotions. In fact, the research has shown that it causes more problems, because what happens is, after your consciousness is raised about those behaviors, then somebody of the minority group acts a certain way that reinforces one of the stereotypes. People go back and say, well, maybe there's some truth to it. Right. So diversity and inclusion training, I think, has to stop. And I believe that leaders, not some DI vice president, but leaders of corporations like Mr. Hall did, have to stand up and say, especially family-owned business. They did the same thing at Coors Beer. Coors Beer, if you remember, had a whole thing in the 80s, early 90s, about the bigotry within the family, the Coors family. And they created a Black college fund. And they gave reparations to former employees. They did all sorts of things, because the leadership, not some person in charge of diversity,
right?
Leadership stood up and said, we own this company, and whatever happens in this company is our problem. And we're more enlightened, I guess, than our grandparents or great-grandparents at Coors, and we're going to change our behavior. And if you don't like it, go work somewhere else.
Yeah, David, where does this language take you? I've used it in other contexts. I've never used it in a place of diversity and inclusion, but there's a difference of transferring data and information versus transferring knowledge, which is go ahead.
I know, I fully agree with you. I say, listen, I'm an educator. I'm not a trainer, and I'm not an instructor. An instructor, trainer's job is to fill up a post hole with knowledge.
Yeah.
My job is to make you think about that information so it changes your life. So it changes the way that you interpret the world.
So then that's a different goal. The DEI stuff that I have gone through my earliest days at Pfizer in the early 90s, through Merck Pharmaceuticals through the early 2000s, it was quite obvious. The goal was to transfer data and information.
That's all it is.
Which is short-term memory at best.
Yeah.
It's not reinforced.
It's like a summer camp experience, right? I mean, it's like, that's interesting. Let's go do something. And then the next crisis hits, the next pressure, the next deadline, the next budget meeting, and life goes on.
What area were Merck? Where were you working?
What do you mean, where are they?
No, where were you working?
I was out of Kansas City, and then I was out of New Orleans, and I had that whole Southeast region. When
I was a principal of school in New Jersey, one of their senior people, Merkel, his wife taught for me. And their daughter loved it, because every once in a while there'd be an emergency and they'd have to go to the school playground because the helicopter come pick them up.
Oh, that's interesting.
So he's now retired and lives in Arizona, actually. So yeah, she died, unfortunately. But Merck was an interesting company, one of New Jersey's biggest polluters at one time.
Yeah, sure. I remember when I first started with Merck, George Merck's quotes were still all over the hallways and publications of, treat the patient right, do what's right for the patient, and the profits will come. You can't find that quote anywhere, right? Because that is no longer the ethos of Merck Pharmaceuticals.
No, it's not.
It's get profit and I'll be damned for the patient.
Yeah, well, no, it's I've done work with J&J and others, and I like J&J's. They make a clear difference between consumer and customer.
Mm.
We are the consumer because we use the products. The customers, the nurse, the doctors, the pharmacists.
Right.
If we can't convince them that our products are good, they're not going to convince anybody else.
And by convince, what Merck did there is we bought them. Bought them, bribed them.
They made doctors rich.
Well, yeah, and I was part of it.
In
the New Orleans area, I mean, we had accounts at all the strip clubs, at all the sporting events. I didn't, right? Merck did. It just means someone at corporate set up POs and reimbursement systems. I'm just not remembering. This thing is recording. But about to be quoted in the Wall Street Journal. Yeah, Evelyn.
Be careful. You know me. I am the.
Yes, Evelyn always asks to stop the recording.
Well,
it's very interesting. What's interesting is I was doing for Ciba Geigy years ago, before when Ciba existed, a focus group with doctors on what are the behaviors reps use to influence them. And unlike the US, the law in Canada is you cannot give them, for coming to the meeting, an honorarium of more than $50.
Yeah, because that's the same at KPMG. Can I tell you guys why I always say stop the recording so you don't think I'm crazy?
No, I don't. I think you're smart.
Okay, because I had a leadership program and there are a lot of investment bankers and traders in it. And when they talk, they use a lot of visceral analogies. It was an all-male culture in those days. This is like 30 years ago. Then the bank got sued and they subpoenaed all the training tapes and they used people's words against them.
Oh, yeah, no.
Something said as a joke became like, this person is vicious and unethical, and their careers were hurt.
Yeah,
so ever since then, I never say anything about that could be taken wrong in a recording, because I was young and I had to send all these tapes to Sullivan and Cromwell, and I saw people's lives get really hurt by it. And they took jokes, these guys joke. That was the culture then, and turned it around into them being almost like criminal-like. Unethical. I don't like a recording. I'm always like, turn off the tape.
Yeah, when I teach behavioral interviewing, I said, be careful what you put in your notes because the courts can subpoena it.
Yep.
And if you put down, even if you put down a smiley face or a frowny face, they don't want that person's interview. They want all the interviews you did during that time, and they'll compare your doodles.
That's why I don't take notes. Because and what I've heard yesterday from a colleague of mine, who's a very good coach. She's not in MG100, but she's very experienced and worked in big companies. And she says that your insurance does not cover you if you're subpoenaed because you're a witness. It only covers you if you're sued, which is a very small piece of information, but important, because most likely you're not going to be sued. Most likely you're going to be subpoenaed. And so I ask people they should check their insurance out on that, because she's in the middle of some mess with that right now. She has hours of subpoena.
Is that errors and omissions insurance?
I'm not sure. I didn't go deep into it because I was, a call like this, and we were talking about a very tricky client she had. Very tricky. That she did the right thing, one of these big companies. And I said, well, you have insurance. And then she said, oh no, if you're subpoenaed. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. I'm sure it's covered somewhere else, but it's not covered in your malpractice insurance.
Yeah, well, I have errors and omissions insurance, and I have to look into it.
Yeah.
It's funny because I have to pay extra because most of my clients are outside of Canada.
Well, that's another issue, is international, which I'm trying to figure out. If your company is domiciled, if you can be sued, I sound like a geek. Do you want me to shut up? I sound like a geek.
Oh, right.
Okay. If your company is being tried in a US court, you're covered. This is his costs. Okay. But let's say I don't take that many, I'm very careful about certain global assignments. But let's say you're working in Germany and you guys will know more about this than I do. And they sue the supervisory board in Germany in a German court or something. I don't know, with German laws, then you have more problems. So you can get a rider that covers global.
Yeah, that's what I did. I got the rider that covers global.
What was it like?
It was about 40% of the original bill.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the interesting part is that if you do, I rarely do a contract with a client, but when you do a contract with a client, the client puts in usually a clause that if there's a disagreement, the jurisdiction under which they will sue you.
Well, that's interesting.
So the jurisdiction will always be where the corporate office is. So Michelin was always in France. Citibank was always New York City.
Yeah.
That's where they'll file the case. So it goes, if they file the case in Canada, then I'm covered. I would have no problem.
Yeah, that's why you.
But I figured I'm not going to try to convince Citibank to refile it in Canada just so I can get coverage.
Well, I have 2 or 3 Canadian clients, and in fact, I've had about 3 or 4 Canadian clients, and I haven't thought about that because their companies are domiciled in Canada. So I don't know if I'm covered in Canada.
Well, probably not, because Canada is a foreign country.
It certainly is.
Yeah, very weird, very foreign, very foreign.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, I would check that out. It might be a small rider. If I went to the US, it was a smaller rider. It was so much because I wanted to go beyond the US.
Hiscox won't do it. I would have to get a new policy. I already asked them.
Well, you got an apology. I get mine through the Human Resources Association of Canada. So it's a group rate.
Yeah.
So it's worth the $400 a year that I pay for it, because I still save money if I was going to do it alone.
Oh no, it's really tricky. And it's gotten so, I don't know. It's just a weird world. So Dean, last night I get this email. It says, Dean invites you to all this stuff and it doesn't have a last name on it. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, this doesn't sound like the Dean I know. Okay. This is really cheesy. Okay. Like, did he have a transformation, a personality transformation?
Yeah, I was like,
I said, what? Is this you, Dean? It's some guy named Dean Grazioni. Okay.
Well, Rhett Power must have got a similar email.
Yes.
I got a text from him that says, well, on the program with Aisha. And I was like,
yeah, you're breaking up, Dean.
Thank you. Huh? So from Rhett, it said, congratulations on the program with Aisha.
I know, everybody's confused because
I don't have a program with Aisha.
And you're not Dean Grazioni. I went back on my trail. There's some guy who's stolen your name, okay? And he does these cheesy programs, really cheesy. So I'm like, everybody, it's like buying like stuff on late night TV for coaches. And I'm like, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's so weird.
That is funny.
I know, it is funny. So it is really funny. So I'm just trying to think about what is useful for us to talk about now. Or is Scott joining us?
Obviously not.
Obviously not. He's probably busy.
Well, I would be curious. So I did a blog this morning on it, but I'm curious what you guys are saying.
Yeah, I saw. Yeah.
As the gig economy number of people in gigs growing, where does leadership go in with all that?
Yeah, I know.
Well, the one thing that I'd say is leadership, going back to your Merck example, leadership is seen as a way of saving money. Because they don't have to pay. Leadership is a way of saving money. They don't have to pay insurance. They don't have to pay benefits. They don't have. So if we can convert everybody to a gig economy, we can save 20, 30% of our budget. Because now here's the problem. In Canada, for instance, as a consultant, Revenue Canada will look into, if they investigate it, do I have at least 3 sources of income which are equal? Because if you have if you only have one client, whether you're on gig, independent or not, the one client is, you're an employee. You're considered an employee and they're responsible for your taxes. So technically, they can pay you, let's say, $100,000 and you owe $40,000 in taxes and you don't pay it. They're going to go after the company to pay it because you were an employee, whether they like it or not. California law, it was fascinating when I was out in California a couple of years ago with a client, and employees had different color employee badges. So I thought maybe it was different departments or things. No, it was the California law who says that if you're a gig employee, to maintain that separation, you can't attend team meetings, you can't attend team social events.
Wow.
You can't do this, you can't do that. Now, so each state is going to come up with their own laws on gig. So, and the federal government's obviously through taxes are going to have something to do with it. So from a very sort of basic point of view, I've heard CHROs talking about hiring gig. Unions up here are talking about they don't like the gig economy because they can bring somebody in with an expert for 6 months and they don't have to hire somebody for the job, where they can let somebody go because they don't know it and then bring a person in for 6 months. So the unions are beginning to fight it. And
yeah. So Dave, how does that change coaching practices? So some of us may be on our last 5 years, 10 years of, if you're starting a coaching firm today and going for corporate client and those types of things, how do you market that? How does it change it? Who pays for it?
Boy, the concept of very great. You should write an article on that because
the concept of team is changing. Because I agree with you, Dave. I think from tax incentives to just companies being able to transfer the taxes and health insurance and everything back to this independent contractor, I just wonder what's going to be the impact on the larger or even the small, medium-sized coaching groups.
Well,
who pays for it?
Yeah, what's interesting, Dean, I'm thinking about it from the leadership angle, and I don't know a lot about this. I'm just hypothesizing. But a lot of the companies when you work with startups, a lot of these companies outsource their technology to Albania and all these countries. And they're sort of like, are they employees? They're not employees. Are they employees? They say they have 150 people in this country. You don't know. I don't know. I've never asked what the contracting is, but their ability to be on top and great, okay, and perfect in their work as coding is really important to the culture. So they're basically managing these people. I don't know if they're on contract or not, but they're basically managing large teams of technologists in these other countries. And I don't have wisdom on it, but it's an interesting issue.
So outsourcing, that's been done mostly in the Philippines, India, et cetera. Companies have been doing this for a long time with call centers. So then the question becomes, if I am paying a call center $1 million a month, and they're turning around and taking a profit from that and paying their employees, am I at arm's length from that company, or am I part of that company because I'm paying them to pay everybody else to work for me? Now, the interesting part with call centers are the same call center might handle 5 different banks. And the way they know that it's bank A versus bank B is what line it comes in on. So they change their mentality. As a matter of fact, I was doing something with one of the insurance companies, and this guy was telling me that this one person called an insurance company for a bank card, and he wanted to compare it to another bank card. And the guy said, I can't answer that question, even though our call center handles it. You've got to call, told him what number to call, and it was a person next to him, and they had a 3-way conversation about which insurance he should take.
Wow.
So it's going to be Dean, you raise a very interesting question, but from a consulting point of view, obviously, if the company's trying to save money, they're not going to pay for my coaching.
Well,
So
right. And, I know in the US and some states are more aggressive than others, but just from a federal standpoint, that separation of you being an employee versus you being an independent contractor, it seems like the federal governments are getting more and more strict on what level of independence does this person have, or are they really an employee? And so I've heard rumors that some companies have been concerned about coaching, because if we're coaching the employees the same way they're coaching the independent contractors, have they lost their ability to be independent?
Yes, and then they have to pay benefits.
It's just another
35% benefits.
Right. It's just another evidence that you aren't independent. You're getting the same coaching paid for by the organization. Anyway,
that's a great point.
That's a great point.
That was Uber. That's a lot of them, and it's a lot of our workforce actually. Actually, Walmart. I think this is a fact, so I don't mind saying it, and it's not my client. For a long time, Walmart got its wealth from not paying their employees very much, and they would go on Medicaid. Okay. Because there are food stamps, so the government was supporting Walmart, and which is horrific, right? Horrific. And they have this beautiful art museum. I love art, but now it's turned itself totally around to become an employer of choice. But in the early days, those employees were on food stamps because they paid so little, and so the government was supporting Walmart. It was horrible.
So let me go back. Look, Dean, let me go back to
our clients. I don't care.
Dean, let me go back to our original comment about D&I being visceral. The reason Walmart turned around was during Katrina. The CEO went to New Orleans and he got involved with feeding people through Walmart. And what happened was he realized that they were not being very ecologically friendly towards fish. And he started this whole foundation and this whole movement.
Oh my God.
That we've got to treat people better.
That's a bad story.
Now they have a base salary of $15 an hour, regardless of what the state says is minimum wage. Now, part of that is to fight off unions. But it's still Walmart. He had an epiphany after Katrina. That's what I'm saying.
About fish, not about people.
Well, no, it was about both, but he decided that they sell fish and they're doing it in a way that is probably not the best way. But that whole thing, that if you don't have that visceral reaction,
you're right.
Is your behavior going to change?
I agree with you 100%, David. And I think that is behind so much, but it is behind a lot. I have a funny story, which is I was looking for CEOs to speak at one of my programs, and I was sitting next to this guy, I think at the Council on Foreign Relations, and he said, "I'll speak." And I thought, "You look like you're 12, and I think you might." And he said, "Here's my address," and he gave me an address in Staten Island, which, by the way, is the end of the world in the U.S. Nobody lives.
No, it's beyond the end of the world. Please.
And I'm like, I think I've gotten a fraudulent person here. And I was in corporate then. And I was like, I'm going to bring in this fraudulent guy who looks like he's 12, and I'm writing to him in Staten Island. He turns out to be a young CEO of a big outsourcing company in India. He left Goldman Sachs to build this company. And we brought him in to speak. And the reason he said his parents were at Staten Island, apparently he has an apartment someplace fancy. He didn't want to show off, right? So we gave him his parents' address in Staten Island. And he was such an amazing person because he motivated, engaged in India, all of these employees, gave them great jobs, made them feel part of this giant processing center. He was amazing. He just would stand on tables and enjoy it and pay them fairly. A young guy, and he went off and did something good. It was nice to see. And it was fun. I said, "Why did you give me Staten Island?" I thought you were a fraud. I thought I was like, you were like a crazy person.
Don't judge a book by its address.
I know. Exactly. So that's where my parents live. And then I found out he lives on Park Avenue. Okay. But he was modest. He didn't want to show off.
Yeah, he was being humble.
He was being humble leader, level 5 leader, right?
Yeah, and actually, if he's from India, he probably was being humble.
Have any of you worked with bench scientists, really hardcore bench scientists?
I worked with bench engineers.
Yeah, but how about scientists? That's my new challenge here. There's a lot of it in New York, and I find them very different. to work with, and I just don't have any experience in it. These are people who really do research, hardcore protocols, drug protocols. It's not, these companies are growing and they're
Well, what's her
scientists
name?
need
What's her
coaching.
name? What's her name can help you, who's down in Florida? Rosenblum? What's her
Yeah.
name?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
She probably can, because that's what she does.
That's a good idea. I'll find her. It's very, very challenging because they're so smart. They know everything. They say they do everything, right? You can't really, and I don't have a basis in which to compare. So that's it. All right, that question's over.
Oh yeah, so what we did, I had to go look on Google real quick, with Frugro Chance.
Yes.
Ever heard it? Have you heard of them?
No.
These are rocket scientists.
Yes.
They do a lot of global satellite imaging,
Yes.
and sell that information to oil and gas plays and et cetera, et cetera. But these are all, I mean, so smart they have to wear the lab coats because they can't get the belt through the belt loops, right?
Yes. Yes.
Right type of individuals, which is why my whole theory of lab coats is because you would never trust them because they can't trust themselves. So let's just cover that up, right? So your confidence stays high.
Yeah.
We had to go into this group setting, these initial workshops, and really just set the tone with, we're here to remind you more than we're here to instruct you. You're the smartest people in the room.
That bingo. That's
So
brilliant.
just with the alligator croc brain, right?
Remind you, not instruct you. Right.
We submit to your IQ.
Yes. I love that. I love
right,
that.
Now from there, what's the opportunity?
Yes, I love that because that is brilliant. Thank you.
So the second thing is we pulled from the Project Aristotle that Google did.
Yes.
And so the study before that was Project Oxygen. And the question for the engineers at Google was, the water cooler talk is, we don't need managers.
Yes.
I mean, they get in the way. So they did Project Oxygen, and sure enough, they did need managers. But why? Was it for delegation of responsibilities and whatnot? No. It was most importantly, help me maneuver the political aspects of the organization.
So I can get the resources I need to do my fun work.
Yes. And so
yes.
I'm really smart here. I just don't know how to maneuver politically to advance my career. So we also brought that in the Frugro Chance of, in a workaround of addressing the problem they thought they had, but that's not what we focused on initially.
I love
right.
that.
So
when
we got them one-on-one, it was, how pissed off are you that other people are getting promoted or other people are getting funding and you're not getting it?
I love this. Thank you. This was gold. You should write about that. Actually, Ruth Gotian writes about those people, but she's looking at something different.
Yeah,
but she's looking at really something very, very different. But I think that is brilliant. We're here to remind you, not instruct you.
Yeah, so Samuel Johnson, that's his quote, second quoted guy behind William Shakespeare.
Yeah,
and we build our whole company around it. So to get access to those type A's, I just start right from the beginning. I'm not here to instruct you. I'm here to remind you of things you probably used to do that served you so well, and you're just doing it. But what if you did?
I love that so much. That's fantastic. Well, I have to go, but I think that is brilliant and helpful. And David, I wish you well. How did you know you had leukemia? Did you have symptoms?
No, I had none. It was really kind of weird. A couple of years ago, I went in for my annual checkup. I had made the mistake of not writing down all my questions for the doctor.
Yeah.
As I'm leaving and he's saying goodbye, I said, "Oh, there's one more thing." At night, I wake up and my shirt's wet. I'm sweating a lot.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So he brought me back in. He said, "Well, your glands are swollen in your groin. I need you to go in and get a biopsy." This is like, well, first I had to go get an MRI, then a biopsy. So this was like the end of the year. It was December, like after Christmas. Within a week, I was in the hospital, had the biopsy.
Oh,
and
I'm so sorry.
It came back in the beginning of January and it said I had CLL, but it was inconclusive. So I went to see the oncologist, my wife had leukemia 20 years ago, and
Huh?
she still sees him every once in a while. And so I went to see him, and he said, well, we got to they put this needle that's like 3 feet long into your hip bone,
Yeah.
and they withdraw bone marrow, but on the way out, they also take a piece of the hip. It's weird. Luckily, it's all Novocaine, so I don't feel a thing. They send that out for DNA testing and other testing, and it came back conclusive I have CLL. So he said, it's too early. Your white blood cells count is actually within normal range. So it's been caught very early, so there's not going to be a problem. But then I had to see him every 6 months. And then as my blood cell count went up 6 months ago, I had to see him every other month. And now I'm seeing him every month. And now we got to make a decision.
Wow. Well, there's a resource in the US called the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society.
Yeah, we have that here. I'm a member of
Okay.
it.
All right.
Yeah.
So that is the only thing I know. And I
Yeah.
do have a friend who has this, and that's the worst thing to say, but he's just doing fine.
Yeah.
He's our age. He's doing fine. It was a shock. It was a shock.
Yeah.
But he just called us the other day. He and his wife went to a wedding. They both got COVID. He got it mild. She got it terrible. See,
Yeah. Yeah, there's actually a
he would
drug.
get it terribly. He got a mild case, and his wife got really, really sick.
There's actually a new drug just been approved in the US called LV Shield or LVU Shield. It's by AstraZeneca. It's 2 shots in the tuchus. And it protects you, it shields you for 6 months against COVID.
Wow.
And so right now it is being given to high priority cancer patients.
Yes.
And my oncologist, I'm not high enough priority.
No.
But what's fascinating is my roommate from rabbinical school goes to the doctor one day. He calls me up. He was laughing. He says, the doctor was shocked that I knew what CLL was because now I've got it. So he was trying to figure out if the house that we rented from Abba Eben was the source of our CLL.
I'm gonna end with a funny
because
story.
I've got some of those symptoms that I just Googled it and I'm thinking,
Your medical student syndrome.
well, yeah, so in pharmaceuticals, every drug I sold, I mean, from Alzheimer's to this, I'm like, I think I have this, except for I sold a drug for vaginal yeast infections. That's the only one where I thought, do I? No, I don't have that.
Well, listen,
What you did at the end, David, what you did at the end, the psychiatrist would call a doorknob observation. It's the observation, like you spend all session with them. And then at the last minute, they'll leave and say, oh, I'm thinking of committing suicide over the weekend, right? That's it. And in French, and pardon my French, Andrew, la suite d'escalier, the width of the staircase. Okay, I use that a lot with clients. I will say, okay, when you leave the room, what is the one question you thought you wanted to ask me that you didn't ask in this, in our complimentary coaching session, right? It's a suite d'escalier, right? And I was, back when I was in corporate, I was interviewing to be the CLO of McKinsey. And the guy says to me, he says, how could I possibly not have a question I haven't already thought of? No growth mindset right there.
Yeah. Wow.
But that's very powerful, that doorknob observation of this. How do you pronounce it, Andrew, in French? Le suite de l'escalier. How do you say that? Right.
It's the le bruit de l'escalier.
I'm never saying that way. Okay. I'm sticking to English. Say it again, Andrew. It's so cool. God, French is beautiful.
Le bruit de l'escalier.
Oh my God. I'm never gonna be able to do that. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye. Dean, you sold a lot of drugs. Do you realize that every drug has, if you look on here, the TV ads, basically any drug you're going to take, you're going to die.
Yeah. Some of my favorite ones, there was a drug for weight loss, and it talks about fecal urgency and flatulence with or without discharge. I just thought, you're like, what? Nope, that's without.
So listen, you probably don't have it, but it's good to get it checked out. It's a blood test.
Yeah. I'm due for an annual. So, and we're gonna be coming back stateside here in August. So we'll no longer be full-time in Mexico. So that's gonna Time
So
for me to
why
go
are-
and see a doc.
Why
Right
are
now-
you why are you in Mexico? Is it for personal reasons or for tax reasons or?
No, so my domicile is in Texas. So
Okay.
there's no state taxes there. And I have a residence in Mexico, and just I like it there. The weather's fantastic. The pace is slow. The Wi-Fi is fast. The tequila is cold, and the sunsets are just life-changing. So it's just all the things that I like, and the cost of living is so
Zero.
affordable.
Yeah.
And so just
But-
for those reasons, someone has to live there.
Well, you're also an empty nester. You couldn't do it if you weren't an empty nester.
Okay then, guys. Thank you.
Bye-bye,
David.
everybody.
Hey, David.
No, I'm not an empty.
We're with you.
What, Dean?
See you, Andrew.
Bye, Dean.
No, I'm still here, Dave.
No, I gotta go too. I gotta
you
finish up
you
a proposal.
go. Okay.
Yeah. Anyhow, good seeing you.
Likewise. I'll see you next week.
Yeah, I hope so. Bye.
Yeah. See you. Bye.